This is your Pain Game podcast, where we talk about the game of living in and with chronic pain and trauma, getting to the heart of how to heal. I am your host, Lindsay Soprano. On this show, I plan on discussing with doctors, chronic pain patients, holistic practitioners, loved ones, and anybody that is interested in having their voice heard in the chronic pain and trauma world that we live in. Oh, baby making. Let's talk a little bit about the baby making extravaganza that is part of our world, right? As fun as it sounds to hop in the sack and get preggo, not every woman experiences the joy of going through the process of having a baby, right? Especially the procreation side of it. From a very young age, I always wanted to be a mom. I mean, I did. And was some of that from my upbringing and just knowing that I could do a better job than my parents with my kids? Sure. Of course, there was part of that. Some of it comes from a little bit of trauma, which we're going to talk a little bit about on this episode today. But I knew going in, trying to have a baby, that I was going to be faced with some challenges. The number one thing was I was diagnosed at a very young age with something called PCOS, which is Polycystic Ovarian syndrome, which according to the World Health Organization affects an estimated 13% of reproductive aged women, and up to 70% of effective women worldwide are undiagnosed. It's no big deal, you know. I mean, maybe it's okay that we're not totally populating the planet more of 70%. That's for you to decide how you feel about that. But, you know, after having massive troubles with trying to conceive with my ex-husband, we went through the full gamut of fertility drugs, right? And all the doctors that spent the mortgage payment after mortgage payment after mortgage payment to keep failing. You know, and I remember sitting in putting this episode together, which was actually kind of hard for me to do, but putting together this episode and thinking about what I've been through to not have a baby, I was remembering sitting in the waiting room with all of us girls that all looked healthy. We had our diamond rings and our fancy bags and our fancy reproductive, doctor's office in Newport Beach. It was so gross. And all of us looking at each other and wondering what our stories were. And none of us sharing them with each other. And none of us going through that journey because guess what? We've got it. We've got it. We're going to have a baby. I didn't. And I'm in my particular situation, as people that have listened to this show know, it's actually very good that I did not. But those memories are still here. I mean, stabbing your body with needles and drugs over and over again for years is traumatic in and of itself. So what can we do to figure out what really has been going on with our reproductive systems over the years? You know, we beat ourselves up. We judge ourselves. We feel embarrassed. We put on weight. We've got like hair growing out of like random places, which is only supposed to be for old men, not beautiful young women. And all of this makes us feel batshit crazy. You know, it makes us feel so terrible. So just because I didn't get to the finish line doesn't mean that there are other people in this world that suffer with PCOS that can't get there. And that is what my guest here today is to help talk to us about. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you my guest today, Karlie Henderson. Hello, my beautiful darling. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Lindsay? Thanks for having me on.
Oh my gosh. I know we've been going back and forth about this episode and I'm super excited to talk to you about it. And I really want to give some hope, which is what we do here on this show, to women that have struggled with it and have conceived, and also those like myself who never really ended up getting to that finish line. But you know what? It's okay. Right? So Karlie is a certified nutritionist, premier health coach, and the founder of Charisma Nutrition. She specializes in helping women with PCOS get pregnant, lose weight, and get rid of their symptoms naturally, and maybe a couple little chin hairs while we're at it.
Yes, that's a bonus.
Yeah. This episode comes with a set of tweezers. After struggling with her weight and hormones for her entire life, Karlie was able to lose almost 70 pounds and regulate her cycles. And she is now a mom to two busy boys and without IVS. So that is just like incredible. So let's get started. I want to roll out the real carpet for you, babe, and start talking about what PCOS is, and then let's take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. So for those of you who aren't aware, I mean, Lindsay said it is one of the most common hormone disorders in reproductive women. It's actually the leading cause of infertility in North America, maybe even the world.
Wow.
I'd have to double check, but it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But really, all of these reproductive issues are just kind of collateral damage. It's actually a metabolic disorder, and it stemmed from a combination of insulin resistance, inflammation, and usually adrenal dysfunction. So your stress hormones, it can be brought on by the birth control pill. And there's all different types, so we can go into all of that. But really, at the end of the day, it's a metabolic disorder that throws your hormones out of whack. And in turn, you end up in survival mode, and you can't reproduce when you're in survival mode, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Can't do a lot when you're in survival mode. And that's something that we talk about a lot on the show too, is the fight or flight. Like my entire body is an inflamed Jones. And it's been like this for my entire life. And I started my period very, very young, which you and I have talked about. And I've been open about it on the show as well. But I started mine when I was 9. Can you talk a little bit about when we start our menses a little bit earlier in life and you couple that with trauma? What happens to our reproductive life?
It's not good. I can tell you that. So I was in the same boat. I remember being 9 years old. It was actually the same summer that my stepmom, who was the only mom I had really known in my life, up and left. I literally came home from school one day and our house was empty. I had no idea what was going on.
Whoa.
Flash forward a couple months, I also got my period and my dad had no idea what to do. But now, as I've gotten older, I have actually learned, and just since 2020, there have been a few really great studies that have come out, not only linking trauma to early menses, but also your predisposition to get PCOS when you have early menses is completely related.
That is insane. And I remember hiding when I had started my period because I was young and I was 9. I mean, you're in 4th grade. Like you're learning about the Constitution of the United States or wherever you live. At least for me, it was, I didn't know you're in Canada, but here in America, 4th grade was the Constitution. And I was raising my hand because I needed to go to the restroom and I didn't know what the hell was going on. And I was in a private Christian school that did not basically allow me to be a young woman dealing with reproductive issues at such a young age. And they gave me detention.
Oh my goodness. At school by yourself. Wow. In a place where you're safe.
Remember when I told you before we started this, that this episode brought up all kinds of stuff that I hadn't thought about? I called one of my girlfriends that I went to elementary school and she was like, do you not remember this? We had to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I'm like, oh my God, no wonder I'm a mess. So when you don't have people to talk to and you faked it. So I faked it for a long time with my parents until I felt like it was okay because all the other girls in junior high started to have it. So I came to my dad because my mom wasn't around at that time. She was working, doesn't matter. Anyway, and I had the conversation with my dad. I already knew what the hell was going on. But I waited and I kept it and talk about suppression. So when we talk about the age of menses and we talk about the trauma that happens to us, infertility trauma, who would have guessed? Can you talk a little bit about why that is so wild? Like what the heck is going on here?
It's all to do with our stress hormone. So already when you have PCOS, you already have a lower threshold to handle stress. Like if you're put in the same situation as your friend who maybe doesn't have PCOS or didn't go through the kinds of things that you've gone through, you're already kind of in a chronically low grade level of stress or inflammation. You're in that flight or flight mode, right? Like you're a lot more irritable. You can be a lot more tired. Something is going to set you off a lot easier than, say, your best friend who maybe handles the situation completely differently. And you are just sitting there thinking, oh, it's just my personality. I'm just like that. Little do you know that it's all to do with your stress hormones and things that have probably gone on in your life.
That is insane. And because you remember, we all got them with our report cards. Like, I always got the can't sit still, talking out of turn. I was in the back row. I was always causing problems. I'm like, I already know what you guys are all going through. All right, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I got to do my own thing. And I was always put into the detentions and the Saturday schools. And I was a wiggle worm and I needed to go to a psychologist. And the whole time, this is what it was coming from. That's insane. And when I looked back, because I do a lot of timeline therapy about things that happened in my life and this is new for me, what happened in my world and why my body and my psyche and my emotions responded the way that they did. And it always was triggered by something like a traumatic event or something like that. And I had no idea that it had anything to do with this. This is nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad that I'm learning this at 40, almost 46 years old. We are being let down all around us. So what can we do? What do we do now in our world with PCOS, where we've got these little girls that are growing up, right? And we've got to educate our parents and our grandparents and aunts and uncles and anybody that would be involved in their lives. How can we educate them about this? And what can we do to hopefully change the cycle of something like this happening?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't want people to get the wrong idea and think that all PCOS is caused by trauma. It's just one layer in a complex synchrony of things that are going on, but definitely education. So if people know that going through trauma, I mean, shit happens, right? Like, life is not perfect and people need to learn to deal with that. But at least in my generation, in my household, it was not really supportive, right? Like, my dad didn't really want to talk about feelings. My dad, like I said, when I got my period, I was 9. I had nobody, just kind of like you. Nobody wanted to talk to me about that. Nobody wanted to talk to me about the divorce that was going on, like all this awful stuff, right? So years later, I did end up going through therapy, but I think just being a little bit more supportive and being more aware of the downstream effect of these things in your life. Like, you're growing, your brain is forming all of these connections, and these are hardwired for the rest of your life, right? It's a very, very important thing that people need to take seriously. So I think having the support there, but also just knowing that it can be even things like exposure to environmental toxins can bring on an early period. So in my hometown, we're in like a very like rural town. We're in Canada, but we're just on the other side of the States. We're about an hour from Detroit here. And it's super rural. Like, my town has grown to about 50,000 now. So it's not as small as it used to be, but we're surrounded by fields, and not organic fields. Let's just say that, right? Like, it's a very agricultural area. And all of that runoff goes into our drinking water. And yes, our water here is quote unquote safe. Personally, I wouldn't drink the tap water, but that's the water that's in the fountains at school. That's all these hormones from all of these animals and fields are rolling off into our drinking water. And there was actually, way back when I was in high school, my town was highlighted on Oprah because we had one of the highest rates of teen pregnancy in North America.
What?
And that's because everybody was getting their period so young. Like, I was 9, and that, like, for me, I was the only one I knew in my class who had their period. But it was like, as the years went on, it was like, wow, we were all hiding something, right? Like, it was crazy.
Wow, I'm sorry for those of you who are just listening and not watching. My mouth is like down to the desk because I can't even with that. I'm like, is this Flint? What's happening?
Yeah, it's not far from Flint, but I wouldn't say it's as bad as that. I think it'd be disrespectful to compare, but
Yeah, I know, but still, it's me.
crazy. It's wild.
It is wild. And I mean, I know that like my sweetie, for example, he's like, yeah, whatever. But like on air and his show and stuff, he talks about, oh, he makes fun of all this stuff. But behind the scenes, it is legitimately something for us to consider. I mean, we think about all the stuff that we ingest and all of just the cortisol that is in the animals, the way that they're killed and in
Mhm.
which we eat. If we don't start looking at all of these things and really take ownership of what we put in our mouth and what we breathe and what we drink, unfortunately, it lies on us. We can't
Yeah.
rely on anybody but ourselves to make the right decisions for our bods. So with PCOS, though, obviously there are all kinds of things that come from PCOS. And the number one thing for us, outside of all of the things that we just talked about, is getting pregnant. And I mean, that was the hardest thing for me. And again, like I said, I'm grateful that I did not get pregnant with my ex-husband. And wow, what a cliche. I thought that getting pregnant would help our marriage, right? Good job, Lindsay. Gross. Very, very gross. So I'm happy that that didn't happen. But when we're talking about getting pregnant, we're going through the stages of trying to, because so many people around us, and I know you experienced it, I certainly did, everybody like thought about getting pregnant and they could. And I'm like stabbing myself with needles and all of these things and giving myself all of these drugs and forcing myself to have sex when I did not want to in order to
Mhm.
try to procreate and get on all these timetables. And that stress in and of itself gets in the way of procreation. Am I right?
Absolutely. Like sex should be fun, right? I
Right?
mean, when you've been together for a long time, I mean, it can get a little monotonous, I guess. But I mean,
Here and there.
shouldn't be like, you shouldn't dread it, right? Like, absolutely not. Like, you're either with the wrong person or something is going wrong here, right? Like, nobody was designed to have sex every day, every other day for 30, 60, 90 days at a time. Like, that's impossible. But honestly, that's what the doctors say. It's like, it's
Yep.
really hard to spot ovulation. The methods that are out there besides blood work are like the ovulation predictor kits, the little sticks that you pee on. Those are not accurate for PCOS. It says so right on the box. The little apps like Flow or Ovia or whatever, those are not great for PCOS because those are just based on the calendar method, which is completely wrong.
Right.
Like there are methods like I use in my program navigating PCOS map to motherhood called the symptothermal method, which is very accurate, but it can be a little bit laborious, right? So it's just so much to deal with. And just even having that edge with your partner adds to your stress, which, it just exacerbates everything.
Yeah, for sure. I'm like, could you just go and like turkey baste me like every time I need to do this? Because I'm going to kill this guy if I have to have sex with him one more time this month.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my God.
And don't even get me started on drunk sperm because I'm pretty sure that was actually more of the issue than it was PCOS, but that's for another show. So when it comes to your journey and working with, I'm going to step back, not working with other people yet. I want to talk a little bit about your journey because you were
Sure.
able to make two beautiful babies in lieu of all of this. So let's talk about that because you are hopeful for all of these women that have PCOS that can't make babies.
Yeah. So before I was a holistic nutritionist, I was a financial advisor. I was not a healthy person. I wasn't, like chronically ill. I didn't have any nameable diseases or anything, but I definitely ate fast food, just not a healthy person at all. And, I came off birth control. This is back in 2018. We actually went away to Mexico to get married. The day we landed, we found out that we got a house. Our offer was accepted on the house that we were looking at before we left. So it was like this big, huge celebration time. A little bit of drama happened there with a loss, and I won't get into any of that. But basically, we were in the headspace of as soon as we were trying to get back from our wedding, we wanted to try to get pregnant. Like we had this house, we had 3 extra bedrooms to fill, and the months went on and nothing was happening. And it just got very depressing, very stressful. I ended up actually having to go on a leave of absence from work. I saw my family doctor who referred me to an OB, who referred me to another OB. I talked to an endocrinologist, and nobody was even doing blood work. Like finally they did like the routine labs where, and like in Canada, it's free, or I would pay for it if I had to, right? Like I just want to know what is going on. Like eventually my period disappeared altogether, which had never really happened. I kind of had irregular cycles, but being on hormonal birth control, that kind of threw me for a loop as well, which happens with a lot of women. But long story short, I ended up having to do a self referral to a fertility clinic about an hour away and doing all those drives for all the medications. I tried metformin, I tried Provera, I tried letrozole, which is similar to Clomid. And basically, after several losses, they were, they did confirm that I had PCOS, but they didn't tell me why. They didn't tell me how this happens, how to get rid of it besides take these medications, and said, this is it. You have to get on the IVF waiting list, which is in Canada. You get your first round for free as long as neither you or your partner have kids. But the waiting list is like 18 months, right? Yeah. So it was like, okay, like I guess I'm going to go on this list. And obviously that was heartbreaking, right? Like I never pictured this. Like I got pregnant unintentionally right before our wedding. So I thought that I was fertile, right? Like I had no idea. So, I mean, that pregnancy didn't work out, but I'd never imagined that I would have any issue, right? Like it was horrible, but I said, F this. Like they just kept saying, oh, we'll just lose some weight. And at the time, I think I was maybe like 40 or 50 pounds overweight, but not like huge, right? Like, did I kind of cringe at pictures of myself? Yes, but it's not
looking at her. She's gorgeous. So you can knock that right off, young lady.
But you know what I mean? Like, yes, I was overweight, but like, I wasn't like morbidly obese. Like, come on. Right. But anyway, so they just kept saying lose weight and you'll get pregnant. And so that's what I started focusing on and learning about PCOS and insulin resistance and, flash forward, becoming a holistic nutritionist and seeing that, okay, it's inflammation, insulin resistance, and stress hormones that are playing a game together, this vicious game. And you can use different things like food and stress management and, therapy. I went through therapy, a ton of it, not just from my childhood, but from going through fertility struggles, right? Like all of these things together can help. But eventually I had 2 boys.
Yeah. And that is amazing. The 2 boys from that whole thing. And I mean, when you talk about cortisol and you talk about stress hormones and you talk about all of those things for fertility drugs, with my stuff that I have called CRPS, I also have PCOS. I mean, how many syndromes do I need to have? I mean, this is like ridiculous. Everything sounds fake and I guarantee it's not. I went through all of these different trials and tribulations and all of this. And what I ended up finding out, one of 3 of the fertility drugs that I was on, and I've read neurological journals like till the cows come home, 3 of those infertility drugs cause CRPS, which is what has put me in a wheelchair. And so it has been a very, yeah, exactly. Well said. So we're talking about not only is the trauma of infertility affecting us on an emotional level, where these drugs are causing us all kinds of other issues with our bods, not to mention neurological changes that happen. And I am not the first one, because there are neurological studies done in regards to fertility drugs and causing things like myself. And there are other things that it causes too. It's very, very scary. But when you are hungry and desperate to have a baby, there are a couple things that I would like to encourage. One is why, okay? Because there's why for everything. Not because your best friend is doing it. Okay, don't do that, because I did that and that's not it. But the why we're doing it and the why that we're making the decisions we're making in relation to our body and our bodies alone. Getting the right doctors, getting the right tests, doing all of these things. And this is part of where you come in to help guide women that are struggling in fertility to actually ask those questions and to look at themselves and look at their doctors and go, you know what? I don't like the way that you did this with me. I'm going to change. Don't feel like you are stuck with your fucking doctor if it's not working. If it hurts their feelings, fine. Get the hell away from them. Do what's best for you, your spouse, your body. So how do you come in now and help people like myself? Well, I mean, let's be real, guys. I'm unhelpable in this department, but helpable for people like myself that are trying to, people like you that really, really, really want a baby and they want to do it right. And they are struggling with PCOS. How do you come in and help us out?
Yeah. So firstly, if you go to your doctor and you've been trying for 4 months, 6 months, And the first thing that they say to you is, come back in a year, or, come back after 3 losses, or here, take this pill. Please fucking run. If they are not addressing any of the underlying issues and they say, oh, we don't know what causes it, like, that's complete garbage. It's complete bullshit. Is there a cure for PCOS? No, unfortunately, there's not. But you can go into, I will say, complete remission. Like, can you just go back to how you were living before? No, because it can come back. But if you do make the right targeted changes and strategic, simple, sustainable changes in your life, your symptoms will go away. It is trial and error. What works for me is not going to work the same for the other person. It's a syndrome. It falls across, what's the word I'm looking for? A spectrum, right? Like, maybe for me, insulin resistance was huge, but for the next person, maybe cortisol is a bigger factor, right? So what I do is I sit down with women, and it's all virtual, but we go through what's called the charisma compass, right? We look at all of their symptoms and figure out, okay, which hormones are most out of whack. We can look at blood work. That's an option as well. That can definitely help, but it's not required. Then we look at their lifestyle, right? Is your sleep shit? Are you really stressed about work? Like, how's your marriage? How's your relationship with your parents? Like, what is going on? Do you have past trauma that you need to deal with? Do you have micronutrient deficiencies? Like, there are so many different areas that we look at. So we do this very thorough assessment, like I said, called the Charisma Compass. And then we follow the 4-step fertility formula. So step 1, address the root cause. Step 2, address what goes in and on your body. So that's not just food, but things like the products that you're using and the environmental, toxins you're exposed to. Anything from your drinking water, your laundry soap, your makeup, hair products, toothpaste, all of that can impact your body. Step 3 is your lifestyle changes. So that's where the stress management comes in. Finding joyful movement, not exercising to burn calories, but exercising as an outlet, right? Exercising to build muscle, to help insulin resistance. If you're exercising to burn calories, like, you're doing it wrong. And then step 4 is to find your fertile window. Like I mentioned before, those sticks and those apps don't work. So I teach the other way that does work.
Yeah, because those things work for the normal person. I mean, if those people even exist, I mean, give me a break. But I'm dumbfounded about call me when you've had more than 3 losses.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
That's what people hear. That's my clients come to me and they say, I've been to the doctor. I've been trying for 6 months. I've had 2 miscarriages. They won't send me for blood work. They won't do an ultrasound. Like, it's crazy. Or they'll come back and say, my blood work looks normal because the lab hasn't flagged it. And it's so important for women to realize that normal from a lab perspective is completely different than optimal when it comes to creating another human.
Thank you for saying that. Like, yeah, okay, you're good, but you're not trying to actually, like, I don't know, populate the earth.
Yeah, like, so cortisol, for example, on one end of the spectrum, we have Addison's disease. On the other end of the spectrum, we have Cushing's disease, right? So yeah, maybe you don't clinically have Addison's or Cushing's. Okay. But does that mean that your cortisol levels are normal? No. If you are crashing at 3 p.m., you can't fall asleep at night, you're tired but wired, you're moody, you have cravings, you're relying on coffee, you're not hungry for breakfast in the morning. These are all red flags that your cortisol is out of whack. Like, we could go on and on and on. There's a ton of them. And of course, they overlap with inflammation and insulin resistance. But at the end of the day, like, all of us are stressed. Even if you don't have a past trauma, just the way that we live our lives now, right? Just a capitalist world, right? Like, work. People are rewarded for not sleeping enough, right? Like, it's so messed up.
It is messed up. And actually, I'm glad that you pointed that out, because I've been having these very delicate, delicate, and let's be real, everybody knows there's nothing delicate about me, but I've been having some conversations about how I need to make some changes in my work life, because I have been an entrepreneur for as long as I can remember, since I was 14 years old when I started my first little business, right? It's always been in me to make sure that I was okay. I can take care of me. I don't need to rely on anybody else. I don't need a man. I can, all of the things, right? And I know where a lot of that comes from. But man, oh man, when you talk about cortisol, that's the first thing when you're talking about why I was unable to, outside of drunk sperm, 100, I think probably 98% of my inability to get pregnant was because of the massive amount of stress that my body has been under since I was at such a young age. Some of
Yeah.
it trauma based, but a lot of it my work ethic, which is great, but it also does a disservice to me in so many places. And I believe over time that a lot of my work ethic, put on my superwoman cape and I can shout that off the rooftops, has actually been to my demise and has ended up being part of why I am as sick as I am and why I'm battling the autoimmune stuff that has come into my life on top of all the other crap. So,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I knew I was going to have a lot to talk to you about.
It's a lot, right? Like
Well,
there's so
and
many
I'm also
layers
like
to it.
really fucking pissed off because how let down have we been? You're talking about these experiences that you've had where we're just like brushed under the rug. And I know women experience it more than men, but why is it that we're so left behind in all of this? Like, why is that? Why is it that, have 3 miscarriages and then come to me? Where does this even come from? And how do you broach that topic when you're trying to support your clients and yourself for that matter?
Yeah, honestly, it's when I'm talking to somebody, they either want advice or they want a listening ear, right? And sometimes I just have to be that listening ear. And,
Sure.
luckily for them, not so luckily for me, but luckily for them, I can relate, right? Just talking to someone who's been through it and who has come out on the other side can be just helpful, right? It can give you hope. And that's what I really try to do in the women. Like, I talk to so many women, even just on DMs every day. Like, no, they're not a client, but am I going to try my best to absolutely help them with even the limited information that I have? Yeah, because it freaking sucks to go through all of this. Like, I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. And then even, going through a pregnancy that was successful, like it got to a point where I would see a positive pregnancy test. And, the first time I saw one, I literally jumped up and down. I was so excited. I was like crying. We were so happy. Like we wanted this so bad to, with my second son, especially like seeing a pregnancy test and like being happy, but like terrified, right?
Sure.
Like that shouldn't be a feeling. Like, after having so many losses, like you go pee and every time you wipe, like you're terrified of blood. Like I had to go through therapy all through my pregnancy because I was so scared that there was going to be blood. Like I would shake, I would dread going to the bathroom. Like I wasn't drinking enough water because I'm like, I don't want to go to like, it was an ordeal. Right. And then something like horrible happened with my second son, Brody. I think I was like 7 weeks or something. I had a subchorionic hematoma, which I didn't even know what that was at that time.
Yeah, can you tell us what that is,
So
please?
basically, it's like a big giant blood clot in between the layers of your uterus. And it basically looked like a horrible miscarriage. Like I remember it was way back in it was really nice out. I remember my husband and I were both working from home and it was the afternoon and we decided like take our lunch break and go for a walk. Nothing strenuous, beautiful day, come back. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go pee. Then I'm going to get back to work. And I sit there on the toilet and I'm like, oh my God, like this feels really weird. And it like, I like cramps a little bit, but not terrible cramps. And I was like, what the hell? And I like look in the toilet and I wipe and it was like a massacre. And I just remember bawling and being like, well, that's that. And I'm like, oh my God, like I knew it was too good to be true. Right. Like my husband comes in and like, this is a bit graphic, but I just remember like being on my hands and knees, blood, and like reaching into the toilet to try to find this like thing that came out of me because it was big. And like grabbing it and I'm like trying to see like, is this the baby in the toilet? Like what came out of me? Like, what is this? And like, it was horrible, absolutely horrible. Like I put it in a wad of toilet paper and then in a baggie and I couldn't even really look at it, but it was big enough that it filled up my fist, like my palm, and it was red and it was just blood. Like it was awful. So I go to emerge and then finally they get me in and they're doing an ultrasound. And they're like, well, there's his heartbeat. And I was like, and I'm not even joking. I looked at this ultrasound technician. I was like, are you fucking crazy? And she,
I have a baby in a Ziploc bag next to me.
I'm like, no, he's
What
not. And like, they're not allowed, but like she turned the screen around, which usually they're not allowed to do here. Like the tech isn't.
Right. Oh, yeah, they're not supposed to do that here either.
Right? So anyway, she turns the screen and she's like, no, look, like that's your baby. And I was like, what? So I'm like, and my family didn't even know I was pregnant at this time because like before, whenever I would get pregnant, I would like tell them within a couple weeks because I was so excited. Not like put it on the internet, but tell, my sister and
Sure.
stuff.
Yeah.
But I got to a point where like I didn't want to tell anybody because I just was so sick of going through all these miscarriages. So that's how they all found out that I was pregnant, was because I was in the hospital because I thought I lost him. And so, yeah, like again, I was already so scared of things. Now I have this condition that literally bled for weeks, and like it's too early to feel the baby. Like it was just horrible. But I just wish that women would just switch their mindset from, I just want to get pregnant, give me all these medications, give me all these things to just get me pregnant, to I need to prepare myself to have a healthy baby, a healthy pregnancy, and a healthy me. Because these fertility clinics are not judged on the amount of live healthy births. They're judged on positive pregnancy tests. And I'm sorry, but coming from somebody who has gone through it and from talking to and working with tons and tons of women who have also gone through it, it's not worth it. Like, yes, it might take you 6 months to get what you're looking for, but I can tell you that it's worth it.
Knew you were going to be amazing today. I have so many things, and I didn't want to interrupt you in any of that. I did happen to throw in that really tacky baby in a Ziploc bag thing, but you know what? Honestly, that is exactly how it felt that you felt. Like, what a horrible feeling. And it is a horrible feeling. I ended up, after everything was all said and done, not with my ex-husband. I ended up getting pregnant down the road, and I ended up losing it. And that's okay. But my body was actually okay at that point in time, which completely supports what you're saying. Like, we are under such mass amount of like, we've got to keep up with the Joneses. We've got to have the babies. We've got to do this. We have to do it in this timeline. I blame a lot of that on baby boomers because that was just part of the thing. You go to high school, you go to college, you get married, you pop out kids. That is not at all how my life ran. And quite frankly, I really didn't want it to go that way, but I was following the norm of what you were supposed to do. And all my girlfriends were getting married and having babies and they had no problems. I did. Did they experience a lot of the trauma that I had as a kid? Not so much. Some of them did, though. So, you have to approach everybody's body as every body. We are all different. So if they're going to say, hey, take metformin, take all of these other drugs, instead of, hey, have you done any walks lately? Are you exercising? What kind of food are you putting in your body? Like, none of that was part of any of my fertility journey. Not one doctor said anything outside of, you might need to lose some weight, to your point, because I was a little bit heavier at the time. Lose a little bit of weight and, eat better. I ate fine. I never have eaten crappy.
And to that, it's like what's healthy for one person is not necessarily healthy for somebody with PCOS.
Correct.
People might think that having a yogurt and an orange for breakfast is a healthy thing. Somebody for PCOS, that is a recipe for disaster. That is going to spike your insulin, which is going to spike your cortisol. Like, it's just not... It's not good, right? Like,
just have a smoothie. You'll be fine. No, I won't actually. Stop telling me to put food in a blender.
And literally clients will come to me and say, yeah, my doctor said, follow the food guide. And it's like, oh my God, I think there's like 7 to 11 servings of grains on the food guide. It's like,
the bottom is all bread, right?
Yeah. And it's like, okay, no, you don't necessarily need to be keto, but we need to be strategic here because the way that 200 calories of cookies versus 200 calories of broccoli influences your hormones on your body is completely different. Like, never mind, already being predisposed because of everything else that has gone on in your life and, the shitty water and food supply that you're dealing with. Like, ugh.
Yeah. And this is something we talk about a lot here, is about getting curious. And if the practitioners that are within our lives, and I'm going to say this until the end of time on this show, which is Western medicine is great for some shit and it's bad for a lot of other shit. And this is
Mhm.
where we have to be our own advocate, and we have to look at what is important to us. How is my body responding to, like, for example, gluten, for crying out loud? I know everybody hates the word gluten free, but god damn it, there is a reason why it is a huge problem. But
Mhm.
my body is different than yours. My needs are different than yours. If you don't go through the motions to figure out what your body actually needs, how you metabolize, are you even absorbing any of the nutrients that you're getting in your body? And that was my problem. Is you can spend $1,500 a month on supplements, and you are literally just peeing and pooping them out, and they're not even doing a damn thing in your body until you find out what your body is even capable of absorbing, and if it's doing anything. So there's a lot of steps that we need to do, because our culture, our food, our products, our doctors, all of it have screwed us all up. And until
Yep.
we walk in and go, I'm in charge, not you, then that's when we can start making a difference. And it's somebody like you by our side that can help us make more babies.
Yeah, it's literally my doctor, my family doctor now has gotten to know me a little bit more over the years. And he kind of, in a very respectful way, he's a nice man, but he's kind of accepted that he's just a lab work signer at this point. Like, he's like, okay, what are you getting done now? And it's like,
Right.
here's my list. And he doesn't fight me on it anymore. If there's a test that's not covered by, the Canadian healthcare system, that's fine. I'll pay for it. And he's just like, okay. He doesn't even call me with my results anymore. I just view them online. Like, and I kind of find myself lucky in that way, but I know how to interpret them. So, somebody else, that's, an unfortunate circumstance that you kind of do have to be your own advocate. But working with somebody who will take the time to get to know you and be on your side and fight for you. Nothing against these doctors. Like, how can they be a specialist in everything, right? Like, how are they supposed to be
Sure.
a specialist in everything? Like, they are only using the tool that they were given, which is their prescription pad, right? But on the other end of things, like, if I'm in a car accident, please bring me to the hospital, right? I had my kids in the hospital, but when it comes to chronic illnesses and preventative treatments, our system in Canada and the US is just completely broken,
Yes.
right? Like, it's all backwards. It's not right.
It isn't, and it fails. It certainly has failed me, and I can only speak for myself, and you can speak for yourself as well. And unfortunately, every single guest on this show says the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we are as a little troop of people getting together, and we're having these conversations to help make a change. Even if we change one person today, then you and I came here and did the right thing, right?
Absolutely.
And it is all about advocacy, 100%, because I am so tired of saying the same thing over and over to yet another doctor. That's why I just stopped going. I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
I have more medical degrees on my walls. Well, of course I don't, but I should have more medical degrees than any of these doctors, because I am curious about why these things have been happening. And the ripple down, the trickle down, I don't really love using trickle down, especially here in the United States of America. But that roll down of the crap that doctors gave me when I was at such a young age, and the things that they did that they thought was the right way, is so wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I will give a little bit of credit to science and us moving forward. I mean, things were a little bit different 20 years ago, right? Okay, so we've learned more, but things weren't that different a year ago. Things weren't that different 2, 3, 4 years ago, right? So we have to learn from the mistakes of doctors and practitioners that have let a lot of the people in our lives down, but also ourselves, learn from those mistakes and get curious about why. And
Well,
then apply those to our own lives and go, hey, wait a second, when I eat bread, blah, or you know what I mean? Like, being aware of your body and knowing that this does this to my body, so I should stay away. It's just like a hot stove.
Yeah,
I don't put my hand on a hot stove, but granted,
No.
I'll take a bunch of pills. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, like, it's something to be said that, science is at its peak. Information is, we've never had more information at our fingertips. Yet as a society, we've never been sicker, and fertility rates have not been lower, right? Like, there so many people are struggling with things that it's like, okay, we have the science, we have the information, like where is this disconnect, right? And I think it goes back to that point that you said, like everybody is individual. And that is part of step one, finding your root cause, is I start everybody with an elimination diet because there is so much misinformation out there, particularly about PCOS, but any condition in general. I'm sure that, this guru and that doctor and that specialist, everybody has their own opinions and everybody's trying to say, everybody with PCOS needs to give up gluten and dairy. And then you've got somebody else saying everybody with PCOS needs to go keto, right? And it's different things work for different people, right? We all have different genetics. We all have different experiences. Some people are not able to stick to that. So starting with an elimination diet and trying, hey, is gluten a trigger for you, right? How do you know unless you try it? And I can't tell you a single doctor who has even mentioned that to any of their clients or patients, whatever.
Whatever.
It's frustrating. It honestly just like grinds my gears.
Well, all of this grinds my gears because you and I both have seen the gross and yucky side of it. You were able to, through all of it, and without IVF, without the stuff that they were trying to get you to do, you were able to prove that this actually works better, and I have 2 healthy babies because of it.
Yeah. And like there are different, severity levels of PCOS. And I would say that mine was pretty severe. Like my period disappeared. I had chin hair. I had, all of these things. I was getting acne all around my chin, which I never even had acne in high school. Like just craving. Like it got to a point where I'd be working at the bank and I would pack a lunch and I would have an afternoon snack. And then I was so hungry and just all these uncontrollable cravings that like I couldn't even get from work to home without stopping at a drive-through several days a week before I would go and get supper or go home and cook supper. And then I'd hide the evidence from my husband because he knew I was trying to lose weight. So it's like, right? Like it can even create like this horrible relationship with food. Like it's really on all levels, right? Like the stress, you're eating your feelings, but then you think, oh, I just have shitty willpower. Little do you know, you're in this state of fight or flight, which makes you want to eat. Like,
yeah, or drink.
Yeah, or drink. Yeah.
Yeah. Which was part of my problem. Talk about insulin resistance. You're like, okay, well, I'm just going to drink through these failings because I can't get pregnant. So maybe getting drunk will help. No, it doesn't help.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It only just makes it worse. So between chin hair and weight loss and popping out babies, I think you're doing pretty good.
Thank you. I mean, I still get a stray here or there. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, we can't cure it, but do I have to carry tweezers in my purse and in my van and in all my bathrooms? And, no, thank God. But
I laugh because the chin hair thing is so funny because my sister texted me last night. Well, this is going great. She's going to love this. I love you, Carrie. I just plucked a 2.5-inch hair out of my chin. So tonight's a great.
Oh my God. No, my sister actually, she's my stepsister. We're not genetically related, but we're only 3 months apart. She's my best friend, like since we were 2 and 3. And she got married September 2022. Yeah. So anyway, she has horrible PCOS and she knew before I did. And she actually had way worse symptoms than I did. Like at her wedding, like she was crying because she had a breakthrough bleed that almost got all over her wedding dress. It was awful. God. And then she was upset because you could like see her facial hair like through her makeup on her wedding day. But she also made changes and bam, like my nephew was born a month ago, December 16th. So
I love it. Well, happy birthday to your nephew.
Thank you.
And happy birthday to, your sister and everybody's continued chin hair growth. So sorry, we always have to have a funny spin around here. So I know that you've been through the gamut and you have had 2 successful, wonderful, beautiful babies, but not for the loss of some others. And I'm so sorry that you have been through that. I went through one. And so I understand the hardship that comes with that. We weren't trying, which is so unbelievably weird in the mix of what I was going through in my previous marriage. But it really does support the chronic stress crazy environment that was at that time when I was trying to conceive versus the one where it's just like, what? Are you crazy? Which came with a loss, but it actually was a good, for the time of our life, it actually ended up being a blessing in its own way. So I look at it a little bit differently than I would have during when I was really trying to. So
Yeah.
you work with your clients and you've got all kinds of support for everybody that is looking for help in PCOS. And I know that you've got a PCOS cheat sheet that you have on your website, which I'm going to put in show notes. I'm going to put all of your stuff. But can you talk a little bit about your offering and what you've got going on for people not unlike you and myself?
Yeah, so my signature program is called Navigating PCOS Map to Motherhood. It's a 16-week program where we work one-on-one. And again, it's hard to really go into everything that we cover, but it's such a personalized approach. We use that 4-step fertility formula to go over everything, and we cover, nutrition, stress management, sleep, timing sex properly, toxin, detoxing, supplements, avoiding toxins, like making simple swaps. There's all kinds of things that we cover. Lab work is an option. But if you do want to go on my website just to see what I have out there, I have some free things. There is a labs guide. So if you want to know what blood work you should get done, there's a free labs guide on there. And it is pretty extensive, but it is worth it. So I do recommend getting most of that stuff done. If you want some help, weeding out the absolute best test, feel free to DM me on Instagram. I also have a supplements cheat sheet. And then my latest thing, just because it's the new year, I created a PCOS to pregnancy fertility planner. So you can have all of those for free, which can make a huge difference. It's a lot.
It's a lot. I know. But you know what? It is so much better to do the little bits of work, even though it sounds like a lot. It's actually less work now than it is when you're failing and you're sick and you're tired and you're exhausted. And then you get into a very, very vulnerable state where you will say yes to anything. You will spend any amount of money because you've gotten to this place of frustration. And one of the things that excuse me, one of the things that Karlie and I talked about early on when we first met was validation. And when you get these test results and when you go through the motion of finding out X, Y, and Z, and you get validated in the feelings that you have, you get validated in the things that you've been talking about, going, this is what's happening. Why don't you listen to me? Why aren't you understanding what I'm going through? When you do get the right kind of test results from the right people that care about the right things, you're validated and you will move in a completely different direction in your healthcare. And that's not just with PCOS and getting pregnant, it's with anything when it comes to your health. And so I applaud you for taking care of all of us in this world of PCOS. And there are so many people that have been on the show and that will continue to be that support this type of work, because it's the only work that I support. Doing it the right way instead of the wrong way, because I've done it the wrong way for so many years, but not because I'm stupid, but because we followed what everybody told us to do. So now it's time to take your health into your own hands. That's it.
Yeah. And you don't have to do it alone either. I think that's another big thing that I want people to realize is, you're going to save a lot of time by finding somebody like, maybe you're an accountant, stay in your space, do your accounting job. Maybe that's something that you're really good at. Leave these other things to the professionals, but make sure it's somebody who is on your side and who will take the time to get to know you.
Amen. Because if they don't care and they're not curious and they're not asking questions, stand up and walk out. That's it.
Yeah.
Walk away, find somebody else. Yep.
Does not mean you have to take it. Does it mean you never take it? No, it just should not be the first line of action.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here today and obviously giving us a message of hope, which is always how we leave our show. Is there anything else that you want to leave us before we hit the dusty trail here?
No, thank you so much for having me on. And again, I'm really sorry for everything that you went through. I know everything happens for a reason, and I'm glad that you have that mindset. Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that it's easy, right? Especially talking about it, it does bring up a lot of stuff, like, reliving some of the traumas that I went through. Like, it just makes me sick to my stomach. So thank you for being so supportive and creating this safe space for not only myself, but for your entire show. I love it. And I'm so glad that I got to finally be a part of it. So thanks for having me.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. It was such an interesting topic when you popped up in my world. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about PCOS because I forgot how hard that all was. I really did. So thank you for bringing that back up.
Oh, geez.
No, it's been great because it actually made me really blessed for where I am right now and the journey that brought me to where I am. And it also made me realize that all the things I've learned over the past few years about health and wellness and trauma, I don't feel bad anymore because of you and this episode, because I didn't before. You just beat yourself up about that kind of stuff and you helped me not. And I didn't even realize that I still was. So thank you. Yeah. She is going to be on all the socials. You can find her at charismanutrition.com. She's on Insta at charisma_. I know we've got to throw the underscore in there just to shake things up. Nutrition. She also has a Facebook group, PCOS, fertility, and weight loss, amongst all kinds of the other things that she talked about. It will all be in show notes. It will be on Instagram, on Facebook, on all the socials. Thank you so much again for your time with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lindsay.
You got it. You are exclusively invited to share this feel better in your fertility journey, including a free little tweezer for that chin hair VIP pain journey together. Let's get to the heart of how to heal with you by my side. I would love to connect with you or anybody that has heartfelt stories about anything that you guys have been through. If you've got problems with PCOS and infertility, please reach out to me. Please reach out to Karlie. We are here for you. We are a safe place to unleash and share your incredible stories, even if it's on Instagram, in behind the scenes in a DM. You don't have to be on the show to share your feelings and your love. We've got you. Please follow the Pain Game Podcast wherever you digest your podcast content. We will be there. Visit us at thepaingamepodcast.com and follow us on all the socials. Thanks for listening, my little VIPs. Catch you on the other side.